You know, with the set, we're still getting some of the details ironed out, and the show's, of course, going to grow into itself as we continue, but I was a tyrant about everything that the viewer would see and hear on this program. Like, the idea with the sort of, like, exotic hunting lodge was specifically to contrast themes of civilization with the jungle, which is very important in 2025 America and the world. So over Thanksgiving, while you and I were celebrating exactly as I outlined on the Wednesday episode, President Trump dropped what they're calling the greatest post of all time. People are saying, I hear this, they're saying it's the greatest use of language possibly ever. So you should definitely read it, reread it, provided that you haven't. But to kind of summarize the main points here, he wrote, and I'm quoting, "You've got 53 million people here from the absolute worst countries on the planet. They're living off your taxes. They're turning our beautiful cities into disgusting slums. And the media calls Trump an extremist for pointing this out, of course, as they've been doing for 10 years. Here's the truth, however. The first world is not normal. We talked about this a year ago at length. This is the rarest, most fragile exception to exist in the history of mankind. Everywhere else in the world, the state of man is betrayal, it's rape, it's corruption, barbarism, and the more of that that comes over here, the more we have of that over here. We become more like them, not the opposite. That's why we say American exceptionalism. We are the exception to the mean. We are the exception to the typical trajectory of mankind, be that today in the world or 200 years ago in the world. And so Trump just fired the starting pistol on remigration, or I guess we're saying reverse migration. And you will learn today exactly why this must happen. It has to happen. This indictment must be seen all the way through until people don't even believe that things ever deviated from like 1960s standard of living in this country. So to kind of unpack it, because it is sort of, again, the greatest use of language possibly ever. Every sentence is like hitting a new point that we could talk about for like an hour pertaining to this like third world invasion, which is a term I don't even really like, but we'll talk about that more. So he starts with the number being 53 million, refugees, illegal aliens, legal immigrants stampeding into America. Many, of course, during Kamala Harris's tenure as the border czar. This is not hyperbole. That is census data, DHS data, ICE data, all of which, combining into this beautiful number. 53 million people from what Trump is calling failed nations, from prisons, mental institutions, gangs, drug cartels, you name it. Now all of these people live among us. They're not doctors. They're not lawyers. They're not engineers. They're not even entrepreneurs. All of these things that were promised by the Democrats all turned out to be lies. They are the bottom of the human barrel. They are on welfare at rates that would give you a heart attack. And then, of course, he names the state that proves his point. Minnesota being one of the whitest, safest, highest trust states in America. So much so that when they made Fargo, like the joke of that movie was that something like that could never happen in Minnesota. Now it's overrun with Somalis. Gangs are roaming the Twin Cities. They're stabbing people in the streets. Then you've got Ilhan Omar, who literally married her own brother, by the way, to scam the immigration system. She goes on to lecture actual Americans about racism and tolerance, and Trump says this is unsustainable. He's correct, and that if this goes on, the damage will literally be irreversible. And then he drops another truth nuke. He says the refugee burden is the leading cause of social dysfunction in America. That is a fact. That is not nostalgia. That's not even exaggeration. In 1960, America had almost no violent crime compared to today. We had no massive ghettos. We had no suburbs swarming with cartel goons, apartment buildings being taken over. Children were not afraid to go to school until maybe the latter half of that decade. Post-war America, before all this nonsense, it was the height of probably human civilization. And then we open up the floodgates with the Hart-Celler Act in 1965, and everything goes to hell. So, and finally, Trump just makes it clear. He says the immigrants are getting away with this because of the beautiful hearts of Americans, he puts it. In other words, our kindness is killing us. The same people who are screeching about compassion, these are the same people who turned your hometown into this third world bazaar where nothing works and nobody even trusts anybody anymore in the first place. And so he ties a nice bow on it with the only solution that can work, a very cool, very legal solution. We close the doors and we send all of these people home. A permanent halt to third world migration. And in this post, he outlines the most sensible plan for like this national salvation project that any president has ever proposed, especially when the stakes are this high. This is no longer just an abstract policy debate. It hasn't been for quite some time, probably. But now more than ever, this is a matter of national survival. This is an existential, civilizational threat. Well, how can you just group all of these places together and just make freaking generalizations about the third world? Because we are discussing the first world exception versus the third world default, we'll say. Look at any map focusing on life expectancy, GDP per capita, literacy, violent crime. any marker of quality of life that you can think of. Pick your poison. You will see two realities and very little between them. One small cluster of nations leading that charge. You've got your Western Europe, the Anglosphere, Japan, South Korea, Singapore. These are first world nations. Everywhere else pretty much is the third world, and there's no gentle gradient between these like clusters, you know. There's not like this gradual sloping decline. It is a giant cliff. It falls immediately off, and that's why we use the term exception, because the first world is abnormal. Our conditions are superior to any other society in humanity's existence. The people of these nations, the first world, we live under the rule of law, not men. We have individual rights, property rights, free speech, the scientific method, the idea that strangers on the street are not by default your enemy. And the centuries of development that got us to this point created an explosion of safety, wealth, a quality of life that no empire in millennia before could even come close to. And insofar as those characteristics are no longer like accurate to describing our society, maybe we don't have the rule of law, we're corrupt, free speech is not exactly a thing anymore because we have hate speech laws because of certain groups of people. Consider what has contributed to that change, the change in the composition of that society. You know, in 1950, Detroit was the wealthiest city in the world, the Paris of the Midwest. People could walk the streets without getting their throats slit. I know we've talked about this before. I implore you to understand that the third world is humanity's default state. You get rid of the Western influence there, all the free money, the free resources, not to mention the charity work from those beautiful hearts, and you see what happens. You're talking about an average income less than $4,000 a year, life expectancy maybe in the 60s, governments that exist to loot their citizens, police that function as like glorified gangbangers, a culture based essentially on scamming everyone you meet before they can scam you. Emanuel Wallerstein's world systems theory calls these countries periphery or semi-periphery for a reason. The only things they create are problems. Corruption is a feature of these cultures. It is not a bug. It's not something that can be worked out if we just do it right. So yeah, why can I sit here and lump every third world country together? Because with only minor variations, they run on the same cultural operating system, so to speak, which is shame. In the West, we have guilt. We feel guilt whenever we break the law or we hurt other people, even if accidentally. In shame-based societies, the only sins are getting caught or getting scammed by someone who's more conniving than you. Your job is to promote yourself, to promote your family, your clan, above everybody else and by any means necessary. And everybody is fair game for this, by the way, this kind of like exploitation and abuse. Your uncle can assault your sister and the family won't report it to the police because the shame that would bring is worse than the act itself. That's why I'm tired of these people, you know, white people and their cousins, like all those jokes you see. Go look at the data on how often that actually occurs. In fact, go look at Twitter on Thanksgiving. We just had Thanksgiving. Go to like their sides of Twitter. They all talk about doing stuff with their relatives, like hooking up with their aunts and their uncles, their cousins. They're not even joking. Like they will just tell you these things. And the same pattern exists in Pakistan, Peru, Somalia, Venezuela, any country you can think of. It's blood feuds, it's honor killings, forced marriage, not arranged, forced marriage, often to a family member, caste systems, nepotism as law. It's all of it. These are the foundations of it. These are the load-bearing walls of the third world. Quite differently, the first world is the miracle. It is the miracle exception that took millennia of Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian morality to create. Whereas the third world is what you get the rest of the time. That is the default setting. And when you import people who grow up in humanity's default setting, who never escaped the default setting, guess what? You are importing the default setting. This is basic math. You have no idea how bad these places are. You might think you know poverty. You might think you've seen the opening scene of Aladdin. You do not know third world poverty until you realize it's not even about money. Poverty being about money is a fantasy of the Western mind. In other places in the world, it is just the complete absence of human decency. Because in the third world, the only thing that matters, again, is your group's status. Everything else is up for negotiation. That's why the world's youngest serial killer, this Indian named Amarjit Sada, he could kill multiple babies, including his own sister. And his parents begged their relatives not to go to the police. So murder was acceptable, but the shame that would bring wasn't. The same village that would stone a girl for talking to the wrong boy literally was willing to harbor a child serial killer because if his crimes became public, well, the father would feel shame. He'd be unable to get a job. Or you've got places like Pakistan, where a father can shoot his daughter in the head for looking at the wrong boy, and the neighbors would call that justice. Or Somalia, which I've learned recently from Ilhan Omar, has actually long been regarded as the fabric of the United States. A 12-year-old rape victim can get beaten with whips for adultery. Latin America, you've got 14-year-old girls getting impregnated by their 25-year-old cousins, and the family thinks this is just A-okay. Literally ask them about it. I am not making this up. They will tell you all about it. I was shocked by how casually these people would talk about these things in Texas when I'm having more organic confrontations with the third world without having to necessarily travel there. And there are countless stories like this from the third world, by the way. Just look it up. They all follow the same script. You protect your family, you protect your clan at all costs, even if it means letting your brother assault your daughter. That's why I cannot fucking stand this like family values talk about these groups of people from the third world. Like, it makes people feel good to extend this compliment to them, to use that to justify their mass importation. Hey, family values, we could learn a thing from them. You have no idea what these people do, even to their own family members. It is unbelievable. It's all just like completely corrupt. That's the nature of it. It is just unbelievable.